The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome in, students of the game. My name is Alex Baumann, and I'm joined by my co-host today, Gray Oldenburg and Nathan Glidewell. Week 12 of college basketball college football has come and gone. Week 2 of college basketball has also happened. So we're going to dive into both those things. Let's start off with some college basketball. Gray, Auburn didn't have a big game this past week. They played Kent State, won 79-56, but moved to number 4 in the AP poll. But that Kent State game was close at one point in the second half. Why did Auburn struggle to beat a much inferior opponent in Kent State?
I didn't shoot the ball well from three. I think this Auburn team is going to go as far as they want to if they shoot the ball well from the outside. They only shot 25% from three in this game. Pegues didn't have a good game. Miles Kelly didn't shoot the ball the way he used to be doing. Auburn won this game by going to the guys in the post like Chaney Johnson and Janai Broome, obviously. But also, you give credit to Kent State. Kent State made some circus threes, and that is how a team built like Kent State is going to have to compete with a team that plays defense as good as Auburn does. Is you're just going to have to make those threes when it comes down to it. And Kent State made 5 straight threes, it felt like, in the second half, coming off of a stupid technical foul and getting 2 free throws at the beginning to start the second half to close that gap. And then Auburn was just able to pull away after 2 straight Denver Jones threes later in the game. And the way Chaney Johnson was playing, the way Chad Baker-Mazara played, Janai Broome, I don't think there's any worry. Even though this game was close at one point, I think this Auburn team showed why they are number 1 in KenPom. They are top 4 in the AP poll, and they are top 4 in every other metric, every other computer metric possible. Is they play defense better than almost anybody in the country, especially at the guard positions. You look at Kent State's numbers outside of the 2 guys who were making those circus threes, the Sullinger's nephew, and then Von Cameron Davis, who was the big man who was making those threes, who also got in foul trouble. You look at their shooting numbers outside of those 2 guys. I was just talking about the starters: 1 for 7, 2 of 9, 0 of 4, and then you look at the guys at the bench: 1 of 4, 0 of 2, 0 of 3, 0 of 1. The way Auburn plays defense at that guard position, as well as having an eraser like Janai Broome behind you, is special. And it's going to keep them in the game no matter how they shoot the ball from 3 on the offensive end.
Nathan, flipping over to Alabama, they go 1-1 on the week. They beat McNeese State in a close game, 72-64, but they lose to Purdue 87-78. Why can't Bama get over this Purdue hump that they've been trying to get over the past couple seasons?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a Purdue hump. You just have games like this in a season. Like, Alabama plays a really difficult schedule, and it's been like that for the past few years. I think back to a Houston game a few years ago with Brandon Miller. He didn't have a great game. They ended up winning that one. I think it's about the environment you play in, and let's be honest, West Lafayette, Mackey Arena is just a crazy place to play. They were locked in from the jump. It's really just a combination of things. We didn't shoot the ball well yet again. You go back to the McNeese State game. We struggled in that game. That game was close for a while. We couldn't really separate. We struggled to shoot the ball. And then getting stops on defense was another big thing. We also turned the ball over way more than I thought we should. And then you come into the Purdue game. You play really, really competitively in the first half. You're only down. Really, you should have been up, but you give up a buzzer beater 3 leading into half, which didn't help your momentum case at all. And then in the second half, you end up having a 6-point lead at one point, and then you kind of fall apart. You give up easy shots. Purdue made like 3 straight threes. CJ Cox had an incredible game. He just caught fire instantly. You weren't able to play paint defense really well. Cliff Moore, even though he had 4 blocks, it felt like he struggled to really control the paint. It felt like Trey Coffin-Wren was able to get to his spot whenever he wanted to. He had a fantastic game. He had 25 points, but he was able to get to his spot, get into his little hook, do whatever post moves he needed to do, and basically kept Purdue in the game. Really, outside of that, you go and you break it down. Braden Smith, he didn't have a great game. He ended up with 17 points, but he took 18 shots to get there. He had 10 assists. He really was the catalyst of the offense. I mean, getting it down to Trey Off and Wren. And then Fletcher Royer, he had 17 points. He had a pretty good game. But it's stuff like that where you weren't able to play paint defense effectively enough and get stops on defense when you needed to really have control of the game. And you played more into Purdue style play where they wanted to take it slow on the offensive end and then speed you up on the defensive end. And I thought we played way too out of control on the offensive end where Mark Sears wasn't able to make threes. I thought he needed to really step up, and he wasn't able to turn the ball over a lot. But I will say there are shining points in this loss. LeBaron Philon looked incredible. I mean, he's one of the best players in the country the way he's been playing. And he might end up as one of the best players on the team when it's all said and done. But what's got to improve is the defense, and especially the interior defense. Cliff, he played a pretty good game, but besides that, Grant Nelson, he struggled a ton. Jaron Stevenson, he struggled. We got to find someone else who can help out in the interior because Cliff got into foul trouble. That's the main thing. But it's early on in the season. You play these games to figure out what kind of team you have and to really help you out, especially when it comes into March and April when you want to make a deep run in the tournament. This won't be Alabama's last huge game of the season. They're going to have to play teams like this who just play absolutely physical and want to have this certain style of gameplay where they want to just take you out of your element. And Alabama has to find a way to respond to these type of games and say, we're the better team. We're going to come out and win and dominate the game. Didn't see that this game. It might have been a chemistry issue. I mean, this roster's still freshly put together, and things don't just happen overnight. So, but if anyone can figure it out, Natos can figure it out. He's done it in the past. I'm sure he can do it again this year with a number of talented players he has on the team, but it will take some time.
It is a little odd for Nato's team to be running three big men at one time on the floor to start the game. I mean, you have Stevenson, Nelson, and Cliff in the same lineup at the same time. A little bit weird because Jaron Stevenson's not a true small forward. Great Nelson really isn't either. And there's this thing of positionless basketball, but Nato's offense is predicated around that three-pointer, and Cliff, Grant, and Jaron Stevenson aren't the most prolific three-point shooters on the team at all. So that might be something you look at for Alabama to change going forward, is how that starting lineup is every game, not being three big men. So let's change over to some football here, and let's start off with the Auburn Tigers. Gray, it's the first week in a minute you can talk happily about the Auburn Tigers. They get a 48-14 win over UL Monroe. I don't know if you're aware or not, Gray, but Auburn does have a five-star receiver on their roster named Cam Coleman. I'm not sure if up to this point in the season you realize that he was on the team at all, but he had the best game he's had so far, 8 receptions, 100 yards, and 3 touchdowns. How impressed were you with not only Cam Coleman, but the entire offense this week?
It was refreshing, to say the least. I tell you what, I have been aware that Cam Coleman has been out there. I'm not sure that Hugh Freeze and Peyton Thorne have been, but they were aware in this game. First, talking about Coleman specifically, it finally looked like we were using him the right way, getting those short intermediate passes to him, letting him make plays in space, and letting that open up things downfield for him moving forward. Because obviously there's not a guy on Louisiana Monroe that could stop a guy like Cam Coleman. There's not a guy with any kind of talent level that to compete with a guy like Coleman. And it looked like that was part of the game plan coming into this one. It was feed him early, get him the ball in space, get him the ball with room to run, and let that open things up downfield. And man, he made some circus catches, made some the one-handed catch in the end zone. First of all, terrible throw. Horrible throw.
When is it?
What in the world? But an absolute circus catch. That was the greatest catch by an Auburn football receiver. Not obviously not like meaningful wise, because it was a late touchdown in a game that doesn't mean anything. But challenge wise, that was the greatest catch I've ever seen by far by an Auburn football receiver. And it just shows the type of talent level. And then you talk about a guy like Keandre Lambert-Smith, who I was told by Penn State fans that he transferred out because he was terrible and he wasn't going to play. You people are a bunch of idiots. That dude is an NFL wide receiver. His body control is fantastic. Even though he is more undersized than guys like Coleman and Perry Thompson, guys like that, his ability to rise up and catch balls at the highest point is fantastic. And I promise you will be seeing him at the next level next year, few years down the line, because that dude's an incredible talent. And if he just stays consistent, he can run in any route. That's all you need to know about this wide receiver crew. And then obviously getting it to guys like Malcolm Simmons, getting Perry Thompson some action as well, not getting him a catch, but getting him involved in the offense a little more. I think it's obviously a point to get these freshmen involved, and especially a game like this where, yes, they're going to need to be involved against Texas A&M and against Alabama, but now's your chance to really get them some experience. So we saw that obviously at the quarterback position. Walker White being the first quarterback coming in after Peyton Thorne in this game. There's a major discussion to have about that right now. There's a lot of push for Walker White. Peyton Thorne on the off week did not practice because of a shoulder injury. And up until Tuesday or Wednesday of game week, he could not throw the ball more than 10 yards down the field. Okay, so that kind of opens up to your second string is still Hank Brown, I'm assuming, because that's what the depth chart says. And then you got a guy like Holden Gariner as well. But where does Walker White fit in? You can play him the rest of the games and he can still redshirt since he's not seen any action yet. Where does Walker White fit in? I think Walker White coming in first for Peyton Thorne off the bench instead of a guy like Hank Brown and instead of a guy like Holden Gariner shows that Hugh Freeze and that Auburn offensive staff thinks Walker White can compete for the starting job next year. Whether he's competing against Deuce Knight, whether he's competing against a transfer or two transfers and Deuce Knight, it shows what they think about Walker White, and that's a great thing. Obviously, I picked on Peyton Thorne for the throw against Cam Coleman with the one-handed catch, but he had one of his better games as an Auburn Tiger. That's all I'm going to say about that. Jarquez Hunter reaching the 1,000-yard mark is special. That's a huge deal. It really is. He will go down in the record books as one of the more special Auburn running backs, but also one of the most underutilized Auburn running backs ever, up there with Tank Bigsby and even a guy like Boobie Whitlow. Just completely underutilized for their talent level. And then looking on the defensive side of the ball, freshmen everywhere and making impacts everywhere. DeMarcus Riddick, Jay Crawford, Caleb Harris, Kinsey Faustin, Malik Blockton, Amaris Williams. I can go on and on. It's the freshmen, and you got a tremendous freshman class coming in next year. How does DJ Durkin build this defense? And I'm very interested to see what the freshman playing time will look like over these next two games. You're going to play two top 15, top 10 teams, one at home and one on the road in these next two games. How much action are you going to give those freshmen in these type of SEC games? Because obviously they're your best players. Nobody's arguing that. But are you going to value experience in a season where you lose these two games? You're expected to lose these two games. You win these two games, what the hell? You win one, you lose one. It doesn't matter. Get these guys experience in these type of incredible games. I mean, it's going to be two incredible atmospheres as well. Talk about Jordan Hare at night against Texas A&M, and then on the road in Bryant-Denny and Tuscaloosa. Get these guys action. Obviously, refreshing to see a win, but can't read too much into it. So let's move on and see what we got against A&M.
Yeah, let's move on to Alabama beating Mercer 52-7. Nathan, we saw 11 players get a rush attempt and then 13 players catch a pass. So you saw a lot of young guys and backups this weekend. What were your thoughts on what you saw from those guys? Because we know what the starters look like. They've looked good these past couple of weeks.
And they should have put me out there. I would have done done a great job running the ball. But it was great to get a lot of these young guys experience, guys who haven't seen the field get this season, and especially the walk-ons. I think that's the biggest thing. The walk-ons put in a ton of work throughout the offseason, whether it be working on scout team or just filling in when needed. But it's finally good to see them get some credit for what they've done and get some playing time. And, they took advantage of it. They put up points. They didn't take it lightly. But if let's go ahead and break down the starters first. Ryan Williams, he's 17. If y'all have forgotten,
Wasn't aware.
Yeah, apparently not. But he is just one of the better talents I've ever seen come through Bama, and it's just to the point where he has so much more to learn, but you can actually see how talented he is. Like it is just right up in your face because he has so many intangibles. But I think the wide receiver room did a fairly good job outside of Ryan Williams. I thought Jeremy Bernard had a pretty good game. I saw a lot of great blocking from him, and that's usually left up to a guy like Kendrick Law. But Jeremy Bernard really stepped into that role. I saw Caleb Odom get some playing time. He dropped a big pass, but it was good to see him get some playing time and get worked into the offense. I think he can be a tremendous talent, especially going into next season when he has a little bit more time to develop. Jalen Monroe, there's not much to say about him. He does his thing. And you can't really get too excited because it is a Mercer. But like I said, you got to respect your opponent every week. And I think that people really took that into consideration, and we took it one game at a time. Defense did a tremendous job yet again. 3 turnovers. It feels like every single week we get on here, Alabama's defense has forced 3 turnovers, and the offense yet again does stuff with it. And in one case, they didn't give a chance because Xavier Brown takes it 68 yards, a fumble recovery, 68 yards for a touchdown, which is actually the second longest fumble recovery touchdown in Alabama history. In first being,
everyone
should know the first. Trevon Diggs going 99 yards. Yeah, I think that's pretty iconic. But so saw a lot of great things. But with Keon Sabb being out for the rest of the season, that was announced early on today. I think that it really puts a lot of pressure on Bray Hubbard, especially going into these final stretch of regular season games, for him to keep up how he's been playing. I think he's definitely up to the task, but the defense is a little wounded, and that does worry me a little bit. But then I look at the offense, and the offense is firing on all cylinders. They've been taking care of business ever since the Tennessee game, where they just looked so out of place. And I'm hoping that we have a great game plan, especially going into Oklahoma, because let's be honest, Oklahoma's not an easy place to play. They're a good team. They have a really good defense, and you can't take them lightly. You got to go in there and take care of business. So I think this team needs to be in the right mindset entering Oklahoma, and then after that, going and playing Auburn at home, taking care of business in the regular season, and then whatever comes after that, it's really just not up to you after you handle what you're supposed to handle. Would we like to be playing in Atlanta? I am of the few people who want to go to Atlanta and play in the SEC championship. I want a shot to win it, and if we want to talk about losing that game, should it count against the runner-up of the SEC? I don't think so, just because how the schedule goes in the SEC. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here. So a few games to go, and so a lot of craziness to happen. It is November in college football.
Hear me out. The conference championship games should not count against a team's record, win or loss. It should just be a thing next to your name. Alabama, Georgia, whoever, 10-2 conference winner. Not, and if you lose, they're still 10-2 conference runner-up. It shouldn't affect the team's record for them getting to that point and playing in a conference championship, rather than putting in another 10-2 team who sat out their conference championship. So I think going forward, the NCAA and conferences have to look at maybe making it to where the conference championship, win or lose, does not change a team's record. It's just a qualifier to get to the college football playoff.
Or the SEC just doesn't have a 16 tie. Let's just not do that again.
That'll
Yeah,
always happen.
but when you don't have divisions, it's gonna happen. This
Yeah.
this is the SEC. It's competitive. We know what kind of talent we have.
It's going to happen in every conference. I mean, the Big 12's got a tie right now. The Big 10 will probably have that. But the SEC will be the conference you look at. That'll be the big one that you're going to see going forward.
Because as of right now, a 10-2 SEC team who did not go to Atlanta would be in front of a 10-3 SEC team that lost in Atlanta, which is
I think that's the stupidest thing ever because you're competing for a conference championship. And let's say, flip side, you win it. I mean, you got a bye in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like, that is the stupidest thing. I think the runner-up should probably be the second highest ranked team coming out of the conference because they worked hard to get to where they were.
So the runner-up for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about some other games here in the SEC. Florida beats number 22 LSU 27-16. It looks like LSU has been broken these past 3 weeks. I don't know if it was Bama or A&M. I don't know what happened, but LSU is broken. I'm pretty sure everybody that's listening, watching, y'all have seen the interaction Brian Kelly had with Chris Hilton Jr. on the sideline, getting up in his grill. You could lip read what he was saying to him. If you haven't, go look on Twitter, X, any social media platform, it's on there. And then later in the game, he got into it with Kyron Lacey. Lacey actually got up into his grill. So there was a flip script there. Is it time for LSU to be looking elsewhere with Brian Kelly? I mean, for him to have players yell at players like that and then have players do the same thing to him, and you be on a 3-game losing streak and not making a notable conference playoff game for your fourth year here?
I think, well, I've two things. The second thing, I'm going to answer the question. First, my message is to Texas A&M. We know you've locked LSU in the halftime locker room. Let them out because, I mean, they don't even have to play the rest because whatever they've got out there now, they could finish it, I guess. They'll lose, but let them out. We know what you've done. We know you're a cult. So let them out before law enforcement has to come. No, but in all seriousness, to answer the question, I do think it's a bit of a culture problem. We talk about this all the time, especially with NIL. We were talking all summer about what the effects could be of NIL and the transfer portal and all of that. And we talked about it. It's happening in all sports in college right now. It's a bit of a culture issue, and I think it's a little bit of a sore loser issue. A lot of these players on these teams of very high caliber programs, not saying that they're a really good team, don't seem to understand the concept of growth, not just on the field, but off the field. And a lot of that comes down to coaching. A lot of that comes down to culture. A lot of that comes down to, well, I'm getting paid more than the coach, so I'm better than him. And I think that was a major issue with the Brian Kelly situation. Because of some of the words you can read Brian Kelly's lips say, it sounds more like an ego issue in some certain players. And that's not obviously, if Brian Kelly's doing that in game on the sideline, that's not the first time that's happened with that player. And that's not the first player that's happened with, especially after seeing what Kyron Lacey getting up in Brian Kelly's grill. So I think it's a culture issue. I think there's a lot of teams that have that, especially high caliber programs. I do think it's a bit of a sore loser ego issue as well, saying, well, I'm better than my teammates, or I'm better than these assistant coaches or head coaches because I make more money. We talked about it all summer, how this was going to be a major backlash when it comes to NIL, transfer portal, and all that. And we're seeing the ramifications.
You know, I got a few things to say about Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers, who absolutely crapped their pants going into Gainesville to play the Florida Gators, a team that has had rare success this season, But DJ Lagway coming in absolutely took care of business.
For
LSU
sure, yeah.
did
Good
not
credit
look
for
like
him.
the same team. I mean, I don't even understand what happened to them. LSU has just
I told you what happened to him.
Derailed the tracks. I mean, the train is gone. The LSU train is gone. The tracks they derailed off.
No, they're locked in the A&M visiting locker room.
Apparently, but Brian Kelly has shown me time and time again that he cannot win down the stretch. The games he should win, he ultimately fails. He had some issues like this at Notre Dame. They weren't as prominent because they weren't playing an SEC schedule. But Brian Kelly over the past 3 weeks has kind of been exposed. It's not an issue of talent because LSU has a very talented roster. It's an issue of coaching and getting his team right. I think there's too many distractions around the LSU locker room. People were too worried about individuality and their own success rather than the success of the team. And I think that can be pointed out all the way back to Texas A&M game. I do think there's multiple players in that locker room that are a cancer to the team, just given how they think, had their thought process on where they should be. It's okay to think about individual success, but the success of the team should always come first, and not everyone in that locker room is on the same page. But in my opinion, Brian Kelly should have never left Notre Dame. Should have never left it. He had it built, man. I mean, playing at an independent school, you didn't have to go and play these hard schedules. You were able to have your 1 to 2 huge non-conference games at the start of the year, and then you played a bunch of nobodies the rest of the year, and you just slid into the playoff. And you would have been able – I mean, at Notre Dame now, you do that every year. They don't play a hard schedule. All they did was play – at Texas A&M once. I know LSU couldn't do that. I mean, LSU couldn't win that game, but still, Notre Dame was able to do that. I will never understand why Brian Kelly said, I'm going to go make it way more difficult on myself. I mean, he's on the hot seat now. I mean, LSU fans don't put up with this. They see the amount of talent they have on their team. They know the ramifications that came with this season. They saw where they were. I mean, Brian Kelly really wasted a talent in Jaden Daniels. I mean, Heisman quarterback, and you don't go and do anything with him because you don't get a defense together. And this year, it's worse. It's honestly way worse. It's a coaching issue, and Brian Kelly has to figure it out. He's going to get fired sooner rather than later if he cannot figure out how to get the locker room together and really take command of his team. Because when the coach absolutely loses a locker room like this and shows he has little to no authority over players, it's not going to get fixed by that coach ever again. And you'll have to bring in someone new to get everyone right. And the players in that locker room will have to enter the transfer portal, go to the NFL, whatever they need to do, because it won't be fixed with those players around the team. And ultimately, I don't think it will be fixed by Brian Kelly because he is a soft coach.
It has been reported that Brian Kelly's a $60 million buyout, which is what around that number would be to get him out of LSU. That's not the reason they're keeping him around. It's the commitment of 5-star quarterback Bryce Underwood. That is the main reason LSU has not fired him yet. And if Underwood were to flip his commitment to Michigan, who's making a hard push to get him, Brian Kelly's seat would be the warmest it's ever going to be if he can keep 5-star quarterback, which is at this point up in the air because Michigan and LSU aren't playing good this season. They're both very similar in their records. So if Michigan can throw a big offer at Bryce Underwood bigger than what LSU has thrown, Brian Kelly, I mean, the writing might be on the wall.
See ya.
Yeah, Deuce Knight's going to Ole Miss.
Don't tell Gary that. He might flip out. So number 12 Georgia does beat number 7 Tennessee 31-17, and Tennessee failed to score in the second half. What happened?
Normally they're not supposed to score in the first half. They got to mix it up.
I mean, what happened to Tennessee in this game to lose to Georgia? And how did Georgia flip the script and actually figure out how to play offensive football?
There's some questionable calls in this game, and I think this discussion needs to be – I'm going to push it to be a little bit more about the SEC officiating once again, because we can't have this podcast without talking about SEC officiating. First, I'm going to talk about the 12 men on the field. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just like Alex said about the Brian Kelly situation, go on social media and figure it out for yourself. Because I'll talk about the 12 men on the field because this exact scenario happened to Alabama in the Alabama-Tennessee game a couple of weeks ago, where they did not allow Alabama to sub. And the exact same thing just happened to Tennessee, which cost them a possession in the second half, an early possession in the second half. Because this game in the first half was back and forth, and Tennessee was running the ball well, and Nico was I know he was hurt and in concussion protocol this past week, but he was playing well. Georgia was running the ball well. It was a great football game. But then it was like the refs said at halftime, "Oh, hey, we can't have Georgia lose this game, guys. This cannot happen. We can't let that happen." And that 12 men on the field, where the Tennessee guys running off the field, and the official proceeds to let Georgia snap. And yes, it is a 12 men on the field at that point, just like it was in the Alabama-Tennessee game. That's the official's fault for that penalty. And Josh Heupel in the post-game press conference was just absolutely beautiful, just not getting fined, just pointing the microphone towards the interviewers. Well, what did y'all see? Because, oh man, he could have been fined easy. We know why Caleb DeBoer was so upset a few weeks ago in Knoxville. We know why Josh Heupel was upset. I don't understand how this has happened twice in I don't want to say the two biggest games in this season in the SEC, but two of the biggest games in the SEC this season. This penalty, or this, I don't even want to call it a penalty, this mistake by officials it's not like a foul at the end of a game that completely changes the outcome, or a missed pass interference in the NFC Championship game that completely changes the outcome of the game. Sorry, Nathan. But it's a massive penalty that gave Georgia a first down in a tie game. That can't happen. And the same thing happened to Alabama. I don't understand why we keep having this conversation.
Didn't Greg Sankey and the SEC tweet out something about how good their officials were and how they're like the example for the rest of the country earlier last week? Am I imagining that, or is that fake, or did that happen?
No, that was real.
Okay, real. I just wanted to make sure. I'm just waiting for SEC basketball to really get into gear.
Oh,
and please! Some certain officials.
Trials.
We all have
Pat Adams.
Next house. We can get on the list. We can name a bunch. Tennessee, Georgia. First of all, Tennessee, you reap what you sow. You wanna cheat, you're gonna get cheated. That's what happens. That's how the way it goes in this conference. The SEC officials do not have a clue what's going on. They got their coloring books out there. They're drawing their dinosaurs and their flowers and stuff. They don't have a clue what's going on. But Greg Sankey, sure as hell, he's going to call in, hey, Georgia needs to win the game. Guys, this is Georgia. We can't have them lose again. They're going to be out of the playoffs. we gotta have chaos here. We need Georgia to 10-2. We're going for 10-2. And so anyway, SEC officials take over. Look, is it Tennessee's fault they didn't win this game? Absolutely. They couldn't figure out. They had no offensive identity in the second half. Completely went away from running the ball. Dylan Sampson, he played a fantastic first half. And it's like they just forgot he was on the roster. I'm sorry. Did Auburn play Georgia again Saturday? Because Hugh Freeze certainly looked like he didn't know that Darnell Hunter was on his team. That's what I saw. Nico, look, he played injured. I credit him for really having the fight to go out there on the field. I know he cleared concussion protocol, but still playing after concussion, that's a hard thing to do. I like the tenacity he played with. He went out there. Did he have his best game? No, but he went out there and played, and he gave his team a chance to win. What it came down to was the poor coaching of Josh Heupel. I'm sorry. You have certain situations you need to take advantage of, and they weren't able to do that down the stretch. They weren't able to get Georgia off the field. I know there's flags, but you gave Carson Beck one of the easiest pitches and catches I've ever seen, time and time again. I mean, you didn't put him in scenarios to turn the ball over. You literally just let him sit back there. I don't understand. James Pierce, non-existent, man. I mean, you're beginning of the season, I was told you're going to be the first pick of the draft. You're going to be this just unbelievable edge talent that you're just going to be living in the backfield. Dude's been sorry this season. I mean, especially in this game, he was nowhere to be found. I mean, I guess you get a credit the Georgia offensive line. I really don't think they're that great compared to previous seasons, and that has been shown time and time again this season. Tennessee, you didn't get any pressure from Carson Beck. You didn't force turnovers. You didn't do the things you were supposed to do, and you wound up losing this game. But the game was close. The game was close. The score doesn't tell it because Georgia won by 2 touchdowns, but the game was a lot closer than that. It was really down to a possession game. Tennessee could not get off the field. And if you want to win games like this, especially going on the road, let's be honest, Georgia is not the toughest place to play, but their crowd can get into it, especially for a night game. I mean, that's how it is in the SEC. But Tennessee just didn't take care of business like they needed to. Blame everything you want on the officials. It's not going to help you. You get mad at other opponents when they get cheated against y'all at home because it happens every single time. You don't get to make that excuse now. You can just sit home and cry yourself to sleep because Daddy Josh Heupel can go and win you another big game against Georgia.
The Tennessee defense, I mean, it was non-existent in this game. It was piss poor. It's the worst performance I've seen from this defense all season. You have a left tackle making his first career start at Georgia in Monroe Freeling, and your defense manages to record 0 sacks and 2 TFLs. James Pierce, like Nathan said, non-existent. But the reason he's non-existent is because Tim Banks, the defensive coordinator for Tennessee, is putting him on inside stunts for some reason. Why are we putting James Pierce, of all people, on inside stunts? James Pierce is not an inside stunt pass rusher. He is a pin his ears back and beat you with his pure speed. So Tim Banks, I don't know what on earth his game plan was defensively, but the pass rush is non-existent, and he must have forgotten the week to coach his players how to guard a tight end, especially when you're playing Georgia. You have to realize, hey, Georgia has a tight end on the field. Ask Gray. Brock Bowers last year, if Auburn knew how to guard Brock Bowers, Auburn wins that game against Georgia. No doubt about it. And Tim Banks at Tennessee, piss poor. Offense, I know Nico's hurt. Offense looked piss poor. 17 yards was the longest reception. And Tennessee's offense, as we've seen in years past, is very explosive. So both sides of the football for Tennessee in the second half of the game entirely. Awful performance, awful showing. And this is a game, you obviously go back and watch the film, but you just rub this from memory because you don't want to harp on this game too much, especially in a conference where you can be fighting for the championship here in the final 2 weeks of the season.
It's all fun and games, Greg Sankey, until Georgia loses to Georgia Tech. So
Good happen. Good. All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening and watching, students of the game.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.